Thank you very much, Neil. I appreciate it. I don't want to get too formal about everything here because I know a lot of you wonderful folks here, and I want us to have a real good time, and also I want to share some history with you, but it's just great to be here. I last spoke here when it was the Parrot Jungle. Now, I was never here prior to 1936 because even though I'm aged, I'm not that old, but prior to 1936, briefly, there was a nudist camp on this site. And I was never here for that, I've never been to one. But folks, I just went in there to look at the exhibition, which is partly Pinecrest Gardens, and it's marvelous, and partly the Smithsonian, just to get an idea what was up there, because I know the themes we want to talk about are Miami history, but also work and things of that nature. So I wanted to just provide us with an overview of the area's history, and then kind of home in on some of the themes that the Smithsonian exhibition is trying to point at. And then we've got a lot of slides. I've got Lewis over here. I've given him a couple CDs, and you can get a sneak preview by looking back here. I think that first slide, once it comes up, and Lewis, you want to put that first slide up there? Just kind of open that up for the group, because I want to shock you, and I want to keep it casual. But wait till you see this, this first slide. See this here? You're never going to believe this in 100 years. Remember now, the title of the talk is 100 Years of Miami History. Let's make it about 130 years of Miami history. Let's take it back to about the mid-1880s. Now this view here is Miami, if you can imagine this, in its birth year of 1896, and that would be today's, hold on to your hats now, today's western lane of Biscayne Boulevard and Flagler Street. Look at that. That's how much has changed. So we have a city and that's become world famous, primarily for good reasons, sometimes for naughty reasons. But it's also often had the knock that it's really too young to have a history because it was only incorporated in 1896. We know by the Florida State Census in 1895 there were just 9 people living at the mouth of the river, that is on both sides, the Brickles and the Tuttles. So there wasn't much going on here at the time. In fact, the county's population as late as 1890 was 832 people. They didn't count the Seminoles, and the Seminoles at that time included today's Mississippi's. Now, the same area would stretch from the northern Florida Keys to the St. Lucie Inlet, and that area is in landmass larger than the state of Massachusetts. That's the area that had 832 people. That same area today has about 6 million people. So, you know, things have gotten crazy. And as we know, it's such an incredible growth area. But the knock was we're too young to have a history. Yeah, we know, based on archaeological evidence, that people are living down here at least 10 to 11,000 years ago, way down by the Charles Darring estate. When we pick up the trail of humanity about 3,000 years ago, around the river, different parts of Biscayne Bay, sometimes a little bit inland, what have you. So we've got people living here for a long time. The Spanish referred to the native populations when Juan Ponce de Leon came to the area, likely came into Biscayne Bay, maybe dropped anchor off of Key Biscayne in 1513. He referred to them as Tequestas. And that became, I guess, unofficially the first place name and also, excuse me, the first name for the native populations. So the Spanish were here. And they had at least a 3-pronged goal when they came to the New World, and that was to convert the natives to Catholicism. It was probably the most devout or Orthodox Catholic country in the world at the time. To find gold, that was probably primary among their motives, and to guard the Florida Straits against pirates, because a lot of Spanish treasure ships about once or twice a year would be coming through the Gulf and around the Florida Straits and take the Gulf Stream north, usually north of Florida, then head back to the Iberian Peninsula where Spain is located. And so you had 3 Jesuit missions here, 2 in the late 1560s and 1 in 1743. They didn't have a whole lot of luck in converting the Indians, but they did leave an imprint, and we do have records of it. And we do know that a small number of Indians were taken in 1567 by Pedro Menendez de Avalos, who established the Spanish presence in Florida. In fact, if this was, if our gathering was just 2 weeks ago, we would be observing the 450th anniversary of the European establishment of St. Augustine. And I say European because the native Floridians, specifically the people living up there were called Temucuans, had already established themselves in today's St. Augustine. So St. Augustine 2 weeks ago was undergoing a big observance, 450 years. So the Spanish Jesuits were here, didn't have much luck. They finally left in 1743. They were here just for a few years in the 1560s, came back in 1743. There weren't many native Miamis to minister to anymore, as there had been initially. We really believe that probably as late as the 1500s, there were thousands living on the north bank of the river. Based again on archaeological evidence, Robert Carr and other archaeologists have done a lot of digging on the north bank in the last 40 years and come up with those conclusions based on a lot of fossil and artifactual evidence. So you've got an area that was being depopulated. There was a lot of out-migration, a lot went down in disease, a lot went down through warfare, and among the perpetrators of the war were not just the Europeans, but were the Seminole Indians coming down from Georgia as members of the Creek Nation. So you've got an area that's really kind of a shifting target, and I think the bottom line is that its population continued to decline. If there were many thousands of Quest at the time Juan Ponce came here, we don't know of any of them by the beginning of the 1800s. Florida was again a Spanish colony for the second time around in the 1800s. Spain invited a couple of Bahamian families to come to the area. They gave them land on the New River. They gave them land on the Miami River. You have a small farming community in both areas. There was a move to relocate the Seminoles and all other Native Americans who were living east of the Mississippi to an area west of the Mississippi called Indian Territory. That would be today's Oklahoma primarily. And there was resistance, and that led to something called the Second Seminole War, 1835 to 1842, and a lot of that was fought in southeast Florida. And what that did was, and it was the longest, bloodiest war in U.S. Indian war history. But what it did also was it further depopulated the area. So that if you look at the census, say, of Miami on the eve of the Civil War, it's a double-digit population at best. Just, a forlorn outpost. And things only really begin to change after the Civil War, in part because the federal government during the Civil War in 1862 passed a Homestead Act, which encouraged people to come down here or in other underpopulated areas. And so what we have is, by 1890, even though the population of Dade County is very small, we do have a large, relatively speaking, community called Lemon City, which was based around 61st Street Northeast in the Bay. And we have another large community, relatively speaking, down where the Charles Daring Estate is. It was called Cutler. And then you had really smaller communities. You had Larkins, which became South Miami. And that really doesn't get going until well into the 1890s. And you had Coconut Grove. In fact, in the 1890 U.S. Census, over 100 people lived there. And that place was really, relatively speaking, booming. You had a lot of very avant-garde people living there. You begin to see all the trappings of a community, from a woman's club to a library to churches to a men's club, the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club, and it just goes on and on and on. But there was hardly anything at the mouth of the Miami River. And everything changed when Julia Tuttle got the ear of Henry Flagler. In late February of 1895, they met at her house. Her house was where the entrance is today to the Hyatt Regency Hotel in downtown Miami. And they met there, and he verbally agreed to move his railroad from West Palm Beach, a town he had created, where the railroad had stopped in 1894, to the Miami River in exchange for some really choice land from her. She had 640 acres, much of today's downtown, and some choice acreage from Mary Brickell. The Brickell family owned everything on the south bank of the river, along the perimeter, the bay, probably as far down as 17th Avenue, and then they owned most everything, not everything, but most everything, all the way in to the Miami River on the north. See, the river's moving in a northwestern direction. In other words, today's Marlin Ballpark, today's Little Havana. Most of that was Brickell property, and then everything in the Rhodes neighborhood, and everything in the Brickell Avenue neighborhood was Brickell property. And so Flagler decided to move his rail down. One of the things he envisioned was, and it's kind of interesting, a two-pronged community. He saw this place as really ideally suited for tourism, but he also saw it as a great agricultural community because there had been a couple of hard freezes in Florida in 1894-95, and they hadn't affected Miami at all. So he believed that the place was frost-proof. And with the exception of, a handful of real cold spells, we've been essentially frost-proof since that time. And so he moved his railroad into Miami on April 13th, 1896, and already there were hundreds of people coming here many of them trying to rebuild their lives after getting wiped out by the great freezes of Christmas Eve of 1894 and early February of 1895. And really, I think that's one of the themes of Miami's history, and I think most of us are aware of that this is a place for starting over again, just as it is today for so many people coming from the Caribbean and Latin America in particular. The last time I looked, which was a few years ago, the population of Miami, at least unofficial, was somewhere around 450,000 people. And at that point, 63% of the population was immigrant, which made that percentage the highest percentage of any major city in the world in terms of the immigrant percentage population. So it's been a place for starting over again. Flagler not only moved his railroad down, he agreed to build a great hotel. And Louis, can we look at that next slide? I think it's the next slide, the Royal Palm Hotel. I don't want to go through the slides just yet, but I wanted to put this up here just to kind of tantalize you a little bit because it was quite a place. Let's see where we go now on the next one. Here it is here. Thank you, Rose. This is likely a postcard. There's Biscayne Bay. Look at this here. Miami River would be a little bit behind it, a little bit south of it. So this was part of Flagler's agreement about bringing the railroad down. But you know, I want to tell you something really interesting about the Flagler situation. And we love Julia Tuttle, and we know that she was a catalyst in bringing the railroad down, but she wasn't the only catalyst. The other catalyst was Henry Flagler himself. We have seen correspondence from people privy to him about 1892, 1893, where they're writing, I've seen the letters, I've written an article around it. Mr. Flagler is determined to build his railroad all the way down to Key West. And that was long before the Flagler-Tuttle deal was hatched. It was just a huge challenge for a guy that had been so successful in his life. Remember now, he was a co-founder with John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil. And many people said that he was the brains between all the financial arrangements surrounding Standard Oil. So here was a guy that just had boundless ambition. Brought his railroad in, helped to lay out a city. First street is today's Miami Avenue, then known as Avenue D. The original boundaries when it was incorporated on July 28, 1896, today's 11th Street on the north, the bay in the south, a mile east into the bay on the east, and then it's very irregular on the west. It's southwest 8th Avenue, northwest 8th Avenue, northwest 7th Avenue, up to today's 11th Street. And those were the borders of the original city of Miami, which did not expand beyond that until 1913. But there was a lot of things going on at the time. Early on, it became a great tourist area. And people, the townies, loved to come and look at this aberration. Where are you going to find what today would be a five-star hotel in the middle of the town that only had 1,681 people in 1900? It's been hard to find that. And so they would wander over there then during the wintertime to see who among the rich and famous were there. And invariably, they likely saw Andrew Carnegie and his family, or members of the Vanderbilt family. In fact, on Christmas Eve of 1896, the hotel was still 3 weeks away from opening. Christmas Eve of 1896, Philip Astor came there with his young son, the same Philip Astor who would go down with the Titanic about 20 years later. And he brought his young son there. It's Christmas Eve. The hotel was unfinished. Wasn't ready to open the place yet. And here's Christmas the next morning. He's got this little boy here. And so what do?